Alright, can you guys hear me okay? Hopefully you guys can. Let me know if there's any problems, and I will do my best to fix them, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So, today is going to be a little bit different. It's okay, Slinky. Today is going to be a little bit different, and we're going to go ahead and actually work on something that some of you guys talked about last time, and that is shading. So shading is a really important topic, and it's a little bit of an interesting topic for us because we don't really do a lot of shading in the actual show. Oh, let me get off of my pixel art tools. That's what I was doing most recently, but we'll go ahead and put this back to brush. There we go. And okay, good, I'm glad. But yeah, so shading is an interesting topic that got brought up last time, and while we don't do a lot of shading in the show itself, we do quite a bit of shading in a lot of the promotional material and the still shots we do and such not. And shading is a really interesting topic, and I figured it'd be worth covering. So let's see, how does that look? Whoa, why is that so blurry? Oh, I'm on that. Okay, that's why. There we go, that's a little better. Is it a little better? Is it just because I'm not zoomed in? Okay, yeah. Even if it's just a sketch, I like making sure my brushes are working okay. So for this sketch, I think we're going to do something along the lines of this. Why do I have no pen control? Let's see, is this? Pen pressure. There we go. That should do better. There we go. Now we got pen control, okay. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll sketch in, that's still a little bit, I try to do it a little bit clean at least. So we're gonna make this area look okay, and we're really zoomed out at the moment. Actually I don't necessarily know that I want to put the head there. Give me a little bit here to figure out kind of what I'm drawing. I have an idea. So we'll put in a circle for the chest, and this will be the line going down the center of the chest. And hello, welcome to the stream. So from there, we'll sketch in sort of the back of the leg, and then the leg will be coming down. And here will be the paw. And then his other shoulder is going to be over here. And this is a little bit compressed looking. I'm going to actually scale this down slightly and then stretch it a little upward. And then for the circle of his, I'm going to have his back be right here. The hind circle is going to be here. And we're not going to see a huge amount of his back. I think though actually his leg needs to be a little further back. And then it's going to be kind of, we're at a 3/4 angle here. So there's going to be some overlap. There we go. And we're going to have the other one. The other leg is going to be a little bit further back even. So that's going to be his other paw. And then if we look at the motion, he's mid-jump. Or mid... In the run cycle, there's actually, like, there's an up movement. And then there's a down movement. And right now his back is up, so we want to make sure we put the tail in proper position, and that's going to be the tail lags behind a little bit because it's less rigid. So like the body, you have, like, the tail has a bone structure too, but like you have a lot more of a solid structure here. So like you have the chest, you have the ribs. The tail is a little bit more loose and flowing, so it's going to tend to lag behind a couple of steps. And so when the butt goes up in the air, the bottom of the tail is still going to be down, and then when the butt comes down, the tip of the tail will be up. And thank you, Pink Breeze. I hope my anatomy is okay. It's for once it's not failing me, but a lot of the time when I go to animate, it's just like I can't do anatomy. Why? So today is one of the days when it's working, which is a good thing. And as for the actual head, we're going to go ahead and sketch that in up here. And he's going to be looking sort of backwards a little bit. He's probably being chased by something. and we'll sketch that in so the fluff pattern kind of follows. It's getting a little messy here, but the fluff pattern kind of follows along the shoulder here. And then his ears are probably, let's see, if he's being chased by something, he's probably going to be in a little bit more of a submissive position with his ears, because the ears will go up or down depending on how confident the wolf is. And so his ears will probably be down. And his head fluff is going to be somewhere like that. You might see a little bit of the other ear. And I think, let's sketch in the full, there we go. That should do it, I think. But let's see, there we go. So now I'm going to actually shrink down this because it's quite large at the moment and we want to make it a little smaller. This is a little bit of a big picture here, and we want to make sure we really get some pretty clean lines. So I'm going to go ahead and start, where do I want to start with this? Usually I start with the face, but the face is actually, like, if we were going to look at where, so we have our central line down the chest here. That is not supposed to be black. I wanted that to be blue. We have our central line down the chest here. Let me try and put it in a color where you guys can actually see it. And then we have our central line on the face. The central line on the face is actually going to be behind a little bit. And then we have the nose like this. It can help sometimes to sketch the shapes in 3D so that you can kind of see them a little bit better. Sometimes that helps give a bit of a clearer view as to what is actually going on here. But because of that, that's going to adjust the positioning of the eyes. So I might not start on the head here. I'm going to turn this down. This will be another guide layer, and I'll actually set it to multiply so that it stands out better where it overlaps the gray, and then we'll come in with our black. Alright, hello and welcome to the stream. Let's see. So the ear is usually behind the cheek fluff. And we're going to start by laying in the cheek fluff. And the ear will kind of the cheek fluff will kind of overlap that. So the fluff is going to be a little bit more forward than it would usually be because of the way his head is turned. And I'm going to try and lay in this line art rather quickly if I can, because I want to get to the part that you guys were telling me you were interested in, which is the shading. I think I need to move this up a bit and possibly trim off some of the end. Whoa, my brush size is tiny. This is what I get for doing pixel art the day before stream. And then not changing my brushes back. This is Photoshop. It does have a pretty good animation interface, but you don't have to have Photoshop to animate. There are other programs out there. I just have found that I prefer Photoshop personally. And let's see if we can come up here. And I kind of want, I think we're going to shift, I think his head needs to shift a little bit upward, perhaps, at least the back part here. And then we'll draw in this. No, not like that. The fluff position can be really hard to do sometimes. And it takes a lot of fudging with it to get it right sometimes. Here we go. Maybe that's a little bit better, I think. No, maybe not. Yeah, Fire Alpaca is a pretty good software too. I actually used Fire Alpaca for a lot of my work before I got Photoshop. I'm not as experienced with animation in it though, and from what I've heard, it uses a system that I'm not quite so fond of. It really just depends. It's definitely a viable alternative though if you don't have Photoshop. Why is this one fluff thing being such a pain? I do not understand. If I try, maybe I need to turn these off. There's something going wrong in here, that's for sure. So it's because probably the angle is a little bit, oh, not what I meant to do. I guess I just panned the camera a little bit. But we'll erase all of this. And usually it comes down, that's not actually erasing, okay. More like that. More like this. And again, though, why is it still being such a pain? No, you're not that late. We just started. We start usually at noon, so it's only been a few minutes in. Here we go. I think I'm gonna stop messing with it here. That'll do. So that'll work for the fluff. We'll kind of maybe shift it down just a little bit. Then we're gonna come in and do the ear. So the ear is probably going to be something like it's gonna be a little bit of a lump, and then it's gonna kind of come down, maybe. Possibly, yes. I think that's gonna work. Might be a little bit too much of a lump, though. We'll have to see. And we'll come, hopefully not cutting into this too much. I always hate having to erase next to a line because it's very hard to do without cutting into the actual line, but it can be done. And I think we'll make this shift a little bit so that it's a little bit of a smoother transition. Let's come there. Oops. There we go. And I'm actually going to bring this a little bit more curved. And we'll bring it up there. Well, so Pink Breeze asked, how are you good at drawing using a computer besides practice? When I try to draw on a computer, I fail miserably. It honestly is just practice. That's the biggest way that I learned how to do this. I know you said besides practice, but with these things, they're definitely a learned skill. I wish I had it on this computer, but I do not. But I could show you some of my first tablet art that I ever did. It was pretty bad. This has been, I've been using a tablet for, oh gosh, I want to say about 4 years now. So I've had a lot of practice with digital art. And then as for Photoshop itself, I've been using that for about 1 year, and I've actually had some classes on it at my community college. So that is has been a big help as well. But you can learn on your own. You just have to learn to be able to figure out your style, figure out what you're doing. And the thing is, too, my style has changed pretty constantly. That's not how the bottom of the ear looks. But my style has changed fairly constantly over the time period I've been doing digital art. It's done all sorts of crazy shifts. And, oh gosh, I don't like how this line art is turning out. I may end up reworking some of this later, but honestly, the biggest thing is just practice, getting to know the tools, getting to figure out, learning your style and how you use them is very important. You've got to develop your own abilities, your own style, learn how you do the things you do. And that helps a lot. So let's see. Here we go. And, let's see. Yeah, Photoshop, it is a lot of trial and error. Most of these more complicated programs, because there are programs that are optimized for drawing, and then there are programs like Photoshop that are designed both for drawing and for image editing, and those tend to be a lot more complicated, so you kind of have to learn what works for each program, and it can be a lot of trial and error. And let's see. This is actually going to be Raiden, so we're going to color him in and then do some dramatic shading, and I'll talk about some of the shading and lighting and stuff, and how different styles of shading can have different, they can give a very different feel. And I'll try and demonstrate some of that, because the other thing is not just the style of the shading, not just how and where you shade, but also the color of the shading is really important, because if you have a different colored light source, you're going to need a different colored shading. But we'll get to that all in time. So if I turn these off, does this look... it's getting better. Possibly. I'm going to turn down the opacity on this so I can see that I'm doing a little better, and also on this one. And let's see. Yeah, it just takes a lot of time and practice in most cases. The more you work at something, the better you're going to get. You have to learn, though, I would heavily suggest drawing off references at first, and especially when you're first starting out. Like, this is not a good pose for when you're first starting out, because it's 3/4, and that generally tends to be more difficult than side or front view. There's just a lot of reasons this pose is not good for if you're just starting out. And one of the reasons that I picked this pose is because I want to learn more about 3/4. I finally feel like I'm doing pretty well with the forward view and the side view, so I want to work on the 3/4 view a little bit, and this is a good way of practicing that. But when you're first starting out, it's better to stick to a straight on view, either from the front or from the side. So that's going to be a big thing as well, but you want to draw off references a lot, especially at first, until you get more used to the anatomy. Sorry, my voice goes kind of dead lately, so I have to keep my tea on hand. I've taken to drinking, I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of that throat coat tea. I've taken to drinking that with a little bit of honey in it, and oh boy does it do wonders. I think if I didn't have that tea, I would have a constant sore throat at this point, because I make a lot of videos. So, if you're looking to start out as a YouTuber, tea is going to be your friend, perhaps. Anyway, let's come in this way. And even with the anatomy, too, it can be hard, because once you start stylizing things, like, you have to figure out how to draw in your style. One of the things I actually have a lot of trouble with, even still, is paws. So paws are something that they've always been a bit of a conundrum for me. I've never been super good at them, and I'm finally getting to the point where I can draw them at least semi-reliably in a fairly consistent style, but really it's just sitting there working at it. So like the other day, I was sitting there drawing, and I literally just drew a page full of legs to get used to the anatomy. I drew legs in different positions, so like different positions in the walk cycle, or lifted, different things. So like this, I would just draw this part of the leg, and then I'd maneuver it around and draw it from a certain angle. So I was drawing them from the front, the side, etc. It feels a little strange to just do an incomplete drawing like that, but it's actually really good. Most people refer to it as a study. It's actually a very beneficial thing to do if you're having, especially if you have trouble with a certain part of anatomy. So like for me, I did a bunch of studies on front legs, I did a bunch of studies on hind legs, and I did a bunch on the ears, because ears are something that I've had a little bit of trouble with lately too. So the way this leg is right now, this part of the leg is going to be pushing some of the chest fluff out a little bit. So we're going to actually have a fluff thing coming in this way, because the chest on a wolf tends to be a lot fluffier, at least the way I draw them, than the rest of, like the fur on the legs is shorter, and so you're going to see a lot more fluff. The fur tends to be thick on the chest and the underbelly. That's where you see a lot of really thick fur. And so that's when you'll have lines like this, where it kind of comes out a little bit more and kind of floofs. I may take some of that down, though, a little bit, because that seems almost too fluffy, but it's a little bit, we'll mess with it. So let's see. Alright, let's see. So I don't really know what he's being chased by. He's just kind of running. It might be from the same scene we saw him in the one animation, just from a different angle. But yeah, I don't really know. I haven't always thought. I don't always, when I do a still piece like this, I don't always have to think of a certain, like, you don't always have to know the entire specifics of a situation to draw something. Sometimes you just have to know the general idea of, like, okay, he's running, he's probably being chased by something, but we don't always need to know exactly what. This is why I say I don't always do well with drawing paws, especially at weird angles like this. By being a dog owner, does it help you draw canines better like wolves, or is their anatomy too different? Number one, that heavily depends on what kind of dog you have. Number two, I have a German Shepherd mix, so she does a pretty similar anatomy. And yes, it does help, because I remember being really stuck on a walk cycle and trying to figure out what the heck I was doing wrong. And I go out in my swing set a lot to think, and boy do I ever have stories about that swing set. You guys have heard some of them. But I go out there a lot to think, and a lot of the time she'll come out with me because she likes being out in the yard. Sometimes, if we're out there, she doesn't like being out there by herself. She has a little bit of separation anxiety. So she usually follows me out there, and will come check around the yard. sniffs the scents and everything, and all that sort of thing. And I remember just watching her. She kind of was trotting around, and I kind of just ended up watching her legs and the positioning of her paws, and it kind of just hit me like a ton of bricks what was wrong with the walk cycle, because apparently what I've been doing is I'd actually been drawing the order the feet come down in the wrong order. I think I had the back feet in a walk cycle, at least the way she walks, tend to come down first, and I've been drawing the front feet coming down first. So like you would have back right, I think the order would be back right, front left, back left, front right. I think that would be the order, or inverse to that, starting with the left. It kind of just depends. Quadrupedal run cycles are different, and then there are differences between species. So like wolves and dogs will move fairly similar, but there's also creatures like maned wolves, which aren't actually wolves, FYI. Maned wolves, if you guys have ever seen a maned wolf, I learned recently, the most recent time that I got to go to the zoo, we got to go down to the San Diego Zoo, and they have maned wolves there. And we saw Keeper Talk, and they actually talked about how maned wolves are different in that their front feet and their back feet come down at the same side, so at the same time, so they'll have the front foot on one side will come down at the same time as the back foot on one side, and they just alternate, so it's almost more like a bipedal walk cycle times 2. It's really interesting. So it depends. You gotta go look up footage of the animal you're drawing if you really want to learn how to animate them, and but it can help. It can help if you have a dog, if you're trying to draw dogs or wolves or such. Just keep in mind, like if you have a dachshund, you're probably not going to have as good of an idea of how a wolf is going to walk and run versus if you had like a German Shepherd or a Husky or something. It kind of just depends. And then dogs sometimes walk differently or run differently on their own as well. Like my dog, since she has hip dysplasia, she actually runs differently than a normal dog or a wolf would, because she puts her back feet down at a different timing in order to keep pressure off the affected hip. And it was really interesting because she didn't used to run like that, but as she started developing the hip dysplasia, I noticed she quickly shifted to that, and presumably that, and she doesn't show signs of pain when she runs like that. Like, she has full mobility. She can go sprinting off. She just has adjusted her run to compensate for having a weaker hip. So it's pretty interesting. These guys are honestly very adaptable. But you got to keep in mind factors like this. So it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect, oh, you have a dog, you're going to be able to draw wolves great now. But it sure as heck can help. Have I ever been to San Antonio? No, I've actually only ever been in Texas like one time, and we only drove through the very northern part of it. Hey, Big Claus. Oh, wow, Poland. That's pretty far away. Wow. Well, hello. And yes, we are drawing Raiden here. So this is a little bit like, you may have noticed I'm drawing with slightly larger lines. I don't really like this back part of the leg, but you may have noticed I'm drawing with thicker lines than I did for the actual animation. I'm actually using a size 10 brush, and for the animation I usually use a size 5. And the reason for that is a lot of the time in the still shots I find it's beneficial to have thicker lines. It kind of just helps emphasize everything a little bit more, and that can be important. So that's why I draw with a different size brush. If you've seen my thumbnail art, a lot of the thumbnail art I draw with this thicker style. So if I turn this off, definitely coming along. We're getting there. And then the other thing we're probably going to see here is this line right here. The line right here is actually going to be, because this is the front, but you can actually see if we come back to this layer, I'll get my blue again, we actually, because normally the front of the chest would just go like this, but because his head is turned, you're actually going to see it kind of curve up to match up with the neck. You're going to see that happening, and where that happens, that's going to disrupt the fur pattern, so we're actually going to see some more fluff going on there. So let's see. So if we do something like this, we're going to see some of the fluff kind of following this line, and it'll get less and less extreme the further down you get. So like this far down, it's probably going to fade out about right here because it's basically matched up. But you'll see, and that's probably too extreme, honestly. I've drawn him very fluffy, and I don't think Raiden is that fluffy. That's more what you would see in a wolf with a lot of northern heritage, so like more along the lines of an Arctic wolf. They're going to have a lot more fur because they have to stay warm. Oops, wrong layer. Oh man, if you're going to the zoo, that is a great opportunity to take lots of pictures, lots of videos of the animals if you want to learn to draw them. That's always a good thing to do when you go to the zoos. Make sure you get a lot of pictures of the animals if you can, because you never know when you might be able to use those pictures later, especially if you're planning on doing any sort of art, something or another. And if you plan on drawing a really realistic picture and you use a reference for it, you got to make sure you have the rights to the image, because you could actually get in trouble if you draw a picture based off somebody else's image that they didn't give you permission to use. So there's a lot of images in the public domain. There's a lot of images in that are there's different terms for different images, but if it's your image, you can do whatever you want with it because you're the owner. So it's always good to have your own images if you use a super realistic style that draws directly from pictures. I have done that on a few occasions. That's mostly what I do in my art class. I use the more realistic style. And I always am careful with my pictures, because like if I want to submit any of these to a contest, I would want to make sure I have the proper rights and such. Alright, let's see. Raiden is a boy. So let's see. Here we go. I have, talking on pets, I have 2 cats and 1 dog, and I used to have a hamster, and I've had several fish, and at one point in my life I kept lizards that I caught in the yard, and then, of course, an assortment of insects. I kept praying mantises for a long time when I was younger, and at one point I kept toads, which my mom was not pleased about. My mom does not like toads, and when I was younger I was kind of obsessed with them. Fun story, too. Actually, my mom started paying me to remove toads from the yard, and this was about the time we got my dog, and so me being, I don't even know how old I was at that point. I was probably 10 or 11, maybe 12, when we got my dog. I got the bright idea of training my dog to track down these toads so that I could catch them and remove them from the yard and earn some money for it. And so my dog still remembers how to find a toad in the yard, and every once in a while I'll hear her whining at me, and I'll look over, and sure enough, she'll have tracked down a toad. Yeah. See, the thing is, too, if you use a picture that's, that is copyrighted or that somebody else has, you just can't share it. Now, if you're practicing for your own purposes, it's totally fine, as long as you're not planning on sharing it or anything that could get you recognition or money or anything for that. But for practice purposes, it's completely fine. You just have to be a little bit cautious about if you're going to share it or anything. You want to make sure that the picture you referenced off of doesn't have rights associated with it. Especially, this is a lot less true, but you still have to be kind of careful in the realm of cartoon art. It's a lot more lenient because you're going to have substantial differences between your picture and the picture that you referenced from, but especially in the realm of realism, you want to be really, really careful, because if somebody says, hey, that looks like my picture, you could get in trouble for it. Yeah, the old ranking system of alpha, beta, omega, etc. actually was based off of captive wolf packs, and they've now determined that that's not really true for real life, in the wild. In the wild, they now know that wolf packs generally consist of a parent, or their parents, and then mostly offspring. So now it's more correct to say there is a breeding pair and then there's their offspring. However, that's not such the case in this story. So I shied away from using the alpha and beta omega ranks, etc., because there's a lot of stigma that comes with them, and there's a lot of, it kind of feeds into the old myth. I didn't want to use those terms because I don't want to spread incorrectness about it, but the wolves in the story are of human level intelligence, and so their packs are not always just a breeding pair and offspring. A lot of the time there are unrelated wolves, there's pack rivalries and stuff. There's a lot of things you wouldn't see in real life. So to some extent there is that pattern, but they're not called that. It'd be more, it's more of along the lines of there's a leader, there's a second in command, there's a bunch of warriors and hunters, and usually one or two healers, and then there's juveniles and adolescents, and etc. So, yeah. At this point, it's, I'm trying to put some separation between that and the old ranking system, because I don't want people to, because the trouble is sometimes people take what they hear in fiction and assume it's true. So I want to make sure there's enough separation between this that it's pretty clear that, no, this isn't how wolves actually act. We did do quite a bit of research when it comes to the wolves, and, like, we researched how far can a wolf run in one day, how big are their territories, etc. And we did use a lot of that research to model the world, but when it comes down to it, I would not class Raiden's Quest as a realistic series. We still did research into it, though. Let's see. What is Raiden's rank? That's a little bit... At this point, at the very beginning of the story, when you first meet him, he is a lone wolf. Beyond that, you'll have to wait and see. So let's see. What's a little bit tricky about this picture is that the nose is kind of on the, like, there's, his muzzle is slightly shifted away from us. So we see it at a little bit of a weird angle. And that's a little bit strange to work with. So let's see. Yeah, I can't always answer all your questions in the stream. Or I can answer them, but some of the time my answer is going to be wait and see. So, there's some things that I can't outright answer. And, we will see. Do I know what an axolotl is? That's like the old... Isn't that the sort? They're sort of like sea monkeys, but they're bigger. Sort of. I remember having sea monkeys when I was little too. They die so fast though. They're not. They don't live long. But they're sort of like the sea monkeys, aren't they? Let's see. So I think... I don't know if I want him to have his mouth fully open, but I think he's going to have a little bit of a concerned expression. And, oh gosh. Oh, we're already running out of time. Good gracious. Yeah, I gotta hurry this up. We might have to make this a two-parter, because shading takes a while. I was going to try and do this ahead of time a little bit, but then I decided that, I don't know, I like showing you my process on camera, and especially since this is 3/4, it's kind of nice. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this, we're gonna take his jaw, and we're actually gonna pivot it. And when I do a pivot on something like the jaw, let me see, I hope you can actually see this. When you have a little, can you see that? Yes, you can. So you have this little pivot point in the center here, and you can move this around, and that depends on where it'll pivot from. So a lot of the time when I'm going to rotate the jaw or something, I'll put the pivot point where the actual jaw would be, and then that will move it in more of a realistic manner. So that helps out a lot. And let's see. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not... The axolotls, I keep hearing about them, but I don't know what they... what they actually are. I'll have to look them up. I'm pretty sure they're one of those small aquatic pets, though. Are they? Let's see. Will Raiden end up getting a mate? Wait and see. I can't give any details on that right now. You will have to see. Yeah, I really can't tell you anything about that without spoiling something. So let's see. I think his jaw here sticks out too far, so we're going to scoot that back. Because usually, if anything, wolves are going to have a slight underbite. Otherwise, like if their jaw sticks out too far, it's going to look like they have an overbite. And we don't really want that. Because that would actually cause problems. If anything sticks out, it's going to be the shape of the fur on their chin. So let's see. What do I do when I open their mouths? Oh, goodness. So, like, what exactly do you mean? I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. What exactly do you mean by that? I'm going to adjust some of the fur on his head here. Oh, okay. Thank you, Song. Thank you, Song. I will come look at that after. How many floofs does he have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So he actually does need another fluff here. And, we're gonna see some of that. So where will his eye fall? That's the question. That's going to be the important one here. Probably somewhere... probably somewhere like this. And, is that gonna look okay? Not really. That's also probably kind of small. Yeah, you know what? That's kind of small. We're gonna delete that. And let's see. Oh, that'll be fun, Big Claws. Let's see. Where? Okay. See, the other thing too, just a quick note, the curve of the eyebrow is super important in expression. So if you have, normally the eyebrow will curve outwards like this. It'll have an outward curve, but if you curve it inward like this, it's going to have a very different effect. So keep that in mind when you're drawing characters. The curve of the eye is also going to be really important, but it does create a different feel. So I just wanted to point that out quickly. Let's see. Is this going to be better size? The placement's very wrong, though. Okay, we're going to keep working on this. There we go. So I think the eye is probably going to curve like that. And then it's going to be a little bit compressed, possibly, because of the angle. It's going to be a little bit, like, a little smaller across than if we looked at it straight on. His nose is too big, that's the issue. That's what it is. That's what it is. We're gonna shrink his nose. Wrong one. There we go. That's gonna look a little better. Yeah, his nose is wrong. We also need to... There. That'll help. Half of being an artist is learning to spot what's wrong in your drawings. Because a lot of the time you'll have something and it's like, that doesn't look right. But if you can't figure out what doesn't look right, then you're going to have an awful hard time fixing it. And so that's when knowing anatomy really helps, because it'll help you be able to see where things are going wrong. And once you can identify that, it'll be a lot better in regards to actually fixing it. I'm going to move his eye, possibly rotate his eye. I'm going to rotate it. I think that'll be better. Can't see my keyboard when I have my tablet out. And then that's too far back. And we'll draw like that. That's looking a little bit better. And let's see. Let's see. Let me see. Okay, hold on. I'm reading through everything. When did you find your style, Jay, and is it still developing? The interesting thing about my style is it actually kind of came in a circle. So I had a style similar to this, but less detailed several years ago, and it kind of shifted around from there, but now it's kind of come back to it. Is it still developing? Definitely. I don't think anybody's style ever stops developing, but it can get to a point where that development slows down, because I was at a point for a long time where I couldn't draw in a consistent style at all. Like, my style would change from image to image, and would be totally different when I look from one day to the next even. So like I could draw something one day, and then if I tried to draw the same image the next day, it would look completely and totally different. I'm actually moving his leg over just a little bit because it looked like it was too far back, and he doesn't have that broad of a chest. Wolves actually have very skinny chests for the most part. They're much more along the line. So like if you look at a human, if you look at our shoulders are quite far apart, but we don't have a lot of thickness between our front and our back. We're not that thick. Well, wolves are, like, if you just look at the rib cage, we're not, if you look at the shape of a human's rib cage, it's going to be more along the lines of it's wider, it's wider along, there's axes, and I forget what all these terms are. It's wider between the shoulders than it is front to back. If you look at a wolf's rib cage, it's wider from front to back than it is between the shoulders. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. My tea is very, very good. I'm really liking it, and it's keeping my throat from hurting. This tea, I swear, this tea is miracle tea. So that's something to keep in mind. Except all the honey has sank to the bottom of my tea, and now it's just like drinking concentrated honey. So for the back leg here, trying to get the right shape. So because we're looking at the knee at this angle, it's going to be a little bit sharp. And yes, this is the knee. The interesting thing about wolves is that, so this is the hip, this is the knee, this is the ankle, and then these are the toes. That's a terrible toe. So this is actually the foot, whereas a human would probably have a foot that's more like this size. And then the knee would be a lot bigger and a lot bigger. So it's kind of important to know how this anatomy matches up, because that'll help you visualize things, especially if you draw a lot of like if you draw a lot of humans and a lot of wolves, it can be helpful to know how that matches up. And especially if you're going to draw anthros, by that I mean the upright animal characters. Like if you think Zootopia is anthro. So if you're going to draw characters like that, you're going to need to know how the anatomy matches up. I don't draw a lot of anthro art. The last time I was asked to draw anthro art, I kind of failed it miserably, but that was a while ago. But it's still an important thing to know, because you gotta, it's good to know how all this matches up. I think that does not look right. So let's try and plan in his foot. So, no, I don't want that. I'm gonna get rid of this. So, no, I don't know what button I'm clicking. No, go away, please. Let me delete this, please. Let me delete that. No, don't do that. There we go. So let's see. And thank you, Kalo. Yeah, furries would be classed as anthro, but not every anthro is a furry. Don't get me started on that. No, I'm not gonna talk about furries. Let's see. Like I said, similar but not necessarily. So like Zootopia, you wouldn't really consider that furry. There's a certain culture that goes along with being a furry pretty much, but versus just an anthro character. So I'm not going to get into the details on that. I don't even really understand furry culture that much. But generally a furry is going to be different than just a straight up anthro. So let's see. Here we go. Oh, no, I messed up the line. No, there. No, school. I know, I start college again soon, and that, I don't know. I'm hoping I'll be able to use a lot of Raiden's Quest stuff for my class, but, yeah. So, as for Raiden's fluff, yeah, here. Let's see. Let's try and figure that out. Why is this not working? How many times do I say that in a given art session? Probably a lot. I'm gonna erase this line. Nope, that is not the eraser. There we go. And let's see. There. We'll try and make that. And so I changed my brush size a little bit, and that actually worked out okay because the front stuff in the front has a little bit of thicker lines, whereas the stuff further back has thinner lines. That actually helps with perspective a little bit. I am going to rotate this because we've changed the positioning of the jaw. Whoa, what was that? You can't always see everything that goes on my screen, but sometimes, no, don't do that either, Photoshop. Please behave yourself for once. Photoshop, please don't. Stop. No, I had my window where I wanted it to be, and now it won't go back. Stop it, Photoshop. There. Okay, I'm not gonna touch it again. Dang it. Don't, yeah, stay away from furries, please. I'm sorry, there's just a lot of things that have gone with that culture that are, I'm not gonna talk about it more. Creative writing should be fun. But yeah, remember this has to do with the line that goes from the middle of the chest to the middle of the face. Alright, let's see. Yeah, well, the trouble is, in Windows, if you want it, that's way too much depth for what we can see. If you want, in Windows, if you move a window to the corner of your screen, it automatically assumes you want to full screen it. Or not full screen it, but like make it larger. And I want my Photoshop in a certain resolution so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So that didn't work out so well. And I accidentally moved it. I clicked on the window instead of inside it. And so it assumed I wanted to move the window. And that made me upset because then everything got messed up. So someday I'll probably get a second monitor and that'll help solve my issues. Let's see. I don't like that fluff up here. Probably from here you're not gonna see a lot of depth to the fluff from here because most of it is hidden just by the angle. So what it'll probably be is something more like this, where sometimes you can see there's a little bit. That top one does not look right though. There. No, don't do that. There. and then there. And then we're probably going to see... Sometimes you'll see a kind of like where the hips are, sometimes the hip bone will stick up a little bit, but that's not going to be a huge thing here. Let's see. It depends on the sort of monitor heavily. They can range anywhere from, like a couple, like, probably I would say anywhere from, depending on the quality, 50-ish to several hundred. So, right now this one is fine. I ended up, what I ended up doing when I got my monitor is I got one higher quality one, because I figured it would be better to have one high quality one that I could add on to than a bunch, or than a couple of lower quality ones that, I can't, add on to as well. So this one is nice, this monitor is nice because it's, I want to say it's 2,000 something pixels by 1,000 something pixels, and, this one is nice because then I can record my games in 1920 by 1080 and still be able to see, like, the recording window, still be able to see stuff like that. Okay, so his other foot is, like, right here. When I do get another monitor, it'll probably be, one of the higher end ones. Also, right now, I don't even know that I really have room on my desk. I probably need to get a different desk before I ever get a different monitor. But yeah, eventually I'm hoping to upgrade that because that'll help out for stuff like this. So I need to figure out what I'm doing with his foot here. Let me just see. Also, he is looking way too thick here. So, wolves are usually a little bit skinnier than this. And, let's see. Uh-oh. Did something go down? Has something gone down? I hope it hasn't. So let's see. Hopefully everything's okay. Hopefully. I hope everything's alright. I always get a little worried when somebody is worried in chat. Okay, alright, that's good. Hopefully everything's alright. Okay, it could just be an internet glitch. Sometimes it does weird buffering things. So, one issue we're running into right here is that Raiden seems too thick around here, and he should be a little bit thinner. Raiden is a fairly lean build. He has a fairly lean build. I'm gonna try and erase some of this. That's not gonna work. So we're just gonna have to carefully remove some of that. Or you know what we could do? We could do this the easier way and just remove that part and just delete this. That worked. That didn't work. No, don't do that. No, I don't want... I don't know why it is doing this to me. Why does it... Oh, we can just do this, though, then. That works. That'll work out. And that way I don't have to worry about all that weird erasingness. And so now he's a little bit thinner in build. On the scale of 1 to 10, how hard is this software? Well, this is Photoshop. It can be pretty complex at times. It depends on what you want to do with it. And it depends on how used to it you are. It's really hard at first, but it gets easier. So, okay, I'm going to go back to this layer, and I'm actually going to draw in, because I kind of lost where his other leg went. So, his other leg... No, don't draw on the line art layer. Stop that. There we go. It's going to be more back, or a little bit more. So we're probably just going to see the very bottom of his foot there. His other... That's actually not even what I really like, though. His other foot... His other leg is back further. Actually, we probably won't even see it, because I think it'd be back more like this. And that's too much. Because that's still too far back. Yeah, I don't think we're going to really see his leg, because it's kind of hidden at this point. It's further back than this one. I still feel like his leg is kind of twisted at a weird angle too, but I think it'll be alright. It's going to be further back just because that's how it moves. And so I think that'll work out. Let's come up here. Where's my zoom tool? There it is. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw in his tail. Now I drew his tail really floofy here, but I'm going to not have it be that floofy. And a lot of the time when I draw a tail, I think the top of his tail is generally pretty smooth. It's the bottom that's fluffy. That's going to vary depending on the wolf, and so different characters in this are going to have more, they're going to have different types of tails. So Raiden is pretty, so there's basically, it's kind of complicated. There's several heritages in this, but the notable ones in terms of looks are going to be Northern and Southern. Northern is basically Arctic wolves. Southern is wolves. I can speak correctly, I promise you. But so basically what's going to happen is that and yes, I will send the brush size. This is not an actual animation frame. This is going to be a shading test, but for the actual animation frames, the brush size is most likely 5. But so what I was saying is there's basically, out of the heritages that, what? Oh, how did I end up with 2 extra layers? That was an oops. But as for the different heritages, the ones that are really noticeably different are going to be the Northern and the Southern. So the Northern is the Arctic wolves, and they're going to be really, really fluffy because they need that thick fur to keep them warm. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually drawing on a separate layer so that I can figure out the fur pattern leading up to the point where it's visible, because that helps me know what I'm dealing with placement-wise. But then the other heritage is the Southern heritage, which is the desert, and so whereas the Northern wolves are really, really fluffy and they have a very thick coat, and they have usually smaller extremities, so like smaller ears. They're going to probably have a shorter muzzle, and they're going to look a little bit different because they're trying to conserve heat, and having body parts that are way outside the center of the body is going to make them lose heat more quickly. Now, the Southern heritage is going to be the complete opposite. They are from an area where it's very warm, and they have to get rid of excess heat. And so in order to do that, they have a lot of, they'll have larger ears, they'll have a bigger muzzle, they'll have much shorter fur. They're trying to get rid of excess body heat. That's when that's going to really come into play. So, a Northern heritage wolf probably would have fluff both on the top and the bottom of the tail, whereas a Southern heritage will almost certainly have fluff just on the bottom, and it's going to be even thinner than this. It probably even be... a Northern heritage wolf would probably have a tail that would be much fluffier like this, whereas a Southern heritage would probably have a much skinnier tail. I can't draw lines today. That's almost even more like this. So they'd have very minimal. So Raiden probably, he comes from the valley, which is a fairly moderate climate. It's kind of in the middle. It has both warm and cold, but it's not super extreme when it comes to either of those. So it's a fairly moderate climate. Now what I'm going to do is just erase this extra. And because of that, he doesn't have a lot of extremes. He probably has a thicker winter coat that he grows in every year and then sheds out for the summertime when it's a little bit warmer. Whereas you'd probably see much less of that in wolves where the climate is more stable, so it's either cold or hot year-round. You'd probably see a lot more of wolves having, the Northern ones probably have a very thick undercoat, but they don't shed out as much of it. I do not like how that looks. But they wouldn't shed out quite as much of it, and then the southern wolves wouldn't grow as much of an undercoat to begin with because it's climate and adaptation. And so the wolves that are in the valley are sometimes mixed heritage. Sometimes they do have, if a northern and southern wolf crosses into the valley, or usually that's when it would happen, where you would end up with a mixed heritage wolf who might have some of the traits, but again, it's going to depend on the climate, so they're probably going to adapt to that even somewhat. So, like, if they have a thicker undercoat, they'll probably shed it out more readily, etc. I don't like how that looked. I'm going to get rid of all of that. But Raiden is a fairly middle of the line when it comes to heritage. Although I drew his tail way too thick here, and I gotta redraw that. So here we go. Will there be any other species of canines? There are other species of canines, and one thing that is confirmed is that, so like we have African wild dogs in the savannas down to the south of it. Now, whether that'll be explored, if that's ever explored, it'll probably be a side series, like we probably won't explore a huge amount of that. Raiden's Quest itself focuses on the wolves. We probably won't have a huge chance of them running into a lot of other canines, because again, it focuses mostly on the wolves, and the main species in the valley, which is where much of Raiden's Quest takes place, would be wolves and then probably foxes. So there's a potential of having a fox character at some point, but that's completely unconfirmed. That would be, as for season 1, it's going to deal with the wolves. As for future seasons, we don't totally know. There could be a fox character. We probably won't ever see African wild dogs in the main series, because cool as they are, I think my colorists would probably kill me if I gave them a character with that many irregular spots. But there's always the potential of having, say, a comic series that might explore that, where it's not animating at every frame and such, etc. Okay, let's see. Violin or cello? It depends on what you want. I don't play either. It depends on what kind of sound you want. Both have their purposes. So let's see. This is a question that has come up with the music team. Basically, when it comes to Raiden's Quest, I'm involved to some extent with every single team there is, so it's kind of interesting. It's a very interesting position to be in. Yeah, basically, it's... What it is they're physically comparable to, probably mostly gray wolves here, but they're mentally comparable to humans. So they're not, it's a completely different universe. It's a completely different universe where humans don't even exist. So, like, there's no dogs or anything, because humans weren't there to domesticate them, etc. It's a completely different universe. And the thing is, usually the canine species are... basically, this series focuses on the canines in the world. And so, the one thing that I went back and forth on is, would we see any feline species? And if so, would they be comparable intelligence? But I think at this point... the series focuses mostly on the canines, and so I don't know if we'll see any feline species. I don't know if they're... I kind of want to stray from the trope of cats and dogs having a war, basically. So for now, we don't have plans for many other sentient species. It would probably be foxes, if anything. And if we do see foxes, it's going to be much later into the series. For season 1, there are probably no non-wolf characters. At least as in terms of recurring ones. Now, they will interact with other animals, so, like, we'll probably see them interacting with deer or bears or other species they coexist with, but it's going to be in a relationship of either predator or prey. Either it's going to be a threat to them. You have to think of, basically, if you're looking at these wolves, and I'm going to save this picture before I forget to, but you have to think of it like basically tribes people. So if you look at sort of the kind of, I would compare their lifestyle to the nomadic sort of and the tribal peoples in the world. So they're not a super advanced civilization, but like they're not technologically super advanced, but they're intelligent. And so like and because of their anatomy, they don't really build a lot of things. They mostly live out in the wild. There are some, but like if you look at, can you imagine this guy trying to use some sort of tool to be able to help him? It would be very, very difficult. And oh dear, my tea has leaked. It would be very difficult for him to actually wield any sort of a tool or to craft any sort of stonework, woodwork, or anything like that. So there's not a lot of architecture in the world, but there is a developed hierarchy, there's developed social structures, there's acceptable rules, etc. So, yeah. I know this is going to get compared to warrior cats. At some point, every animal animation out there gets compared to warriors, I think. Okay, so we have extra little, we've got some extra spots here. I don't know why that was there. But we have some extra areas that need to be cleaned up. Because I see little spots we have to deal with. Ooh, there's lots of them here. But, so you got to think of it, it's sort of, in some ways it is similar to warriors, but at the same time, it's different. There's a lot of, not just in lore, but in concept. There's some similarities. So like you would have a structure where they would probably have a healer. The wolves would probably at some point use herbs to heal, and of course that is not realistic, but again, it's going to be within reason. It's not, they're not building cities, which I don't think they did that in Warriors either. I think it was more limited to what they could anatomically accomplish. I can't talk or think today, excuse me. But it's gonna be pretty limited. So like the other thing that we're not gonna see a lot of is characters wearing clothes. There are a few characters that have some sort of clothing item. You've met at least one of them in these streams, but if they do, there's always a purpose for it, and there's always a reasonable explanation. So, I'll see you later, Kalo. Let's see. The thing that happened with Warriors 2 is it very much became a hype. And it's one of those things where I think the series has gone on and on and on. I only read the first book, but I've kind of kept up with the fandom in some ways. I didn't ever... So there's so many books I haven't had the chance to read them all. I still probably should, just for the sake of at least knowing. But it got really hyped, and then it kept going when it maybe shouldn't have. It maybe should have stopped a few books back. It maybe should have... It's to the point where you can only expand so much with a certain set of... There's only so much you can do. And at some point it starts to get repetitive. And there's only so much you can explore. So, like, that's something we're trying to be conscientious with Raiden's Quest, is we know there's only so much you can explore in a given world. And, we don't want to push it to the point where we've hit everything we can and we're reaching for ideas. Because that's when you start to struggle, is when you run out of ideas, because if you continue on something too long. And different worlds are going to have different limits, so like I said, we deal almost exclusively with the wolves in this, but perhaps we would deal with another species later on and do an offshoot series. Perhaps we would explore other elements in the world, but at the same time, we do want to be conscientious of not pushing the world for more than we can reasonably expect to be able to explore in it. That was kind of long-winded, I apologize. I'm not good with words today. Am I ever good with words? I'm not sure. But let's expand this by 2 pixels, so that should get us under the line art, and then we'll mark this layer as lines, and then we will put in a layer of color. let's see. Yeah. Favorite horse breed and color? Oh goodness, I'm not well versed in equines, I'm afraid. I've always been fond of the looks of black horses, though, but as for breeds, I really don't know. I was always better with smaller animals like dogs and cats, and I never really had horses or anything. Oh, this is old. Good gracious me. I just grabbed something to put the color to get the color codes from it, and oh goodness, I missed a toe. But yeah, that's a really old picture. That was probably, if I had to guess, 9 months old. I would guess. Does that cover everything? I think it does. Okay, yeah, not quite. So we will deselect, and then I'm going to fill in some of this by hand. And from there, we should be able... There we go. And then we can just select around the outside of this. And, whoa, that didn't get filled in. We can select around the outside of this and then use that to fill in later. Oh yeah, we gotta go through and get all the tips on these hairs though, because otherwise we're gonna have some blank spots. Alright, here. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, it's hard to find any stories that are genetically realistic, perhaps also in part because we don't even completely understand genetics. Like, I've been researching canine genetics recently, color genetics, for a specific project thing that I'm working on that you guys may hear about. If it goes anywhere, you'll hear about it. But I've been researching it, and oh boy, is that stuff complicated. Most authors just don't get into that, I think. Heck, even I probably won't get into that because I think genetics in this world tend to work differently too. You'll see. Why am I trying to find these colors by hand? You'll see when you get into the story, but there's some things like that are inherited that are going to be a little bit different from real world genetics, and so I think I'm not even going to necessarily stick to a real world genetic model. Oops, I need to expand that. That's what I meant to do. So yeah, but it does. Like some of you guys are saying, it is kind of bothersome when you have a story that's set on Earth but then doesn't comply with realism in some ways. I don't know. Some people have pulled it off well, but some people not so much. Which is why I found it's a lot easier to just say this isn't even Earth, it's its own world. It's a completely different universe, because then you can really craft the laws of the universe. And, that is very helpful in being able to world build, not being constrained to existing rules and laws of physics and all that. Well, physics usually is fairly standard, but you know what I mean. Anyway, let's see with this. Alright, so I'm going to invert this selection here. And then that will enable us to do another layer. Oh gosh. Yeah, realistic fur color is something that I'm fairly big on. I think the most... Like, we're not going to have... There are very few cases where a character is going to have an unrealistic fur color, and most of them have some sort of explanation. And when it comes down to it, most of the characters are at least within the realm of possibility or a slight bit outside of it. So, like, we've had some characters that have a bit of a blue tint. What am I even looking at? Okay. Some of them might have, like, a slight blue tint, but they're not going to have straight-up blue fur. It's going to be done in such a way that it appears like it could be plausible, if not probable. And that's something that bothers me with a lot of animal books too, is that they get really unrealistic without without explaining things. If you're gonna, yeah, you gotta make your own species if you want to put unrealistic fur colors in. And then there was also that, the sparkle dog phase on the internet. Oh my goodness, that annoyed me to pieces because, okay, yeah, I mean, it can be kind of fun to come up with a design like that. It can be a good challenge to come up with a design, but let's face it, most of the rainbow-colored wolves and stuff that we saw at that point were not designy, they were just rainbow to be rainbow. That's what starts to bother me. So for Raiden's quest, for the most part, we try to keep it realistic, or at least within the realm of, near the realm of possibility. It's not going to be super out there. And while wolves don't exactly have breeds, but while we don't have specific breeds, we do have the heritage system, like I mentioned. Some wolves are going to be have certain characteristics because of where they lived, etc. Let's see. Oh my goodness. My dog is like that too. She'll be like, please go to bed. Like, you can just tell. She'll stare at you if you keep her up, and she'll just be like, no, I want to sleep. Go away. Leave me alone. Okay, we're gonna do this. Alright. And the thing is, too, if you're gonna do unrealistic colors, please try to do them well, because, again, too many times have I seen a character that's rainbow just to be rainbow. At least try and come up with a good design for a good purpose, not just bright and neon. Some people have pulled it off. I've seen it done well, but I've also seen it done really badly. So as a general rule, most people should probably stay away from neon. There's a reason I stay away from neon, even. Let's see. Alright. And then as for this, that old picture, I'm sorry if it's painful to any of you guys to look at, because it's painful to me. That was very early, work. And, the style has, you can see the style has advanced from there. But it's kind of hurting me to go back and see that. But I needed to color pick. And to keep the markings consistent. Let's see. Yeah, that's the thing too, is a lot of the rainbow characters are, they are so-called Mary Sue, which, as Pink Breeze explained, is a character that is too perfect. Like, there's no visible flaws. They end up becoming kind of cliche, and they're not an interesting character because they're just too perfect. There's seldom, if ever, a good place for Mary Sue in literature. Even flat characters, which is characters that aren't main and they don't change, they're static. And they're not, so there's 2D characters and 3D characters in fiction. A 3D character is a well-rounded character who changes, who grows, and then there's a flat character who really doesn't change, and most of the time that's going to be the side characters. So, like, you might have Mr. Burns, who runs the pawn shop, and if he's not, if the character goes to him to buy an old ruined dagger or something, he's probably not going to be a main character, and he's probably not going to change the story that much, and so he doesn't really need to be a dynamic, changeable character. In which case, that's probably the closest you're going to be able to viably get to a Mary Sue without it damaging your story. If your main character is like that, you have a serious problem, though, because unless you're trying to pull something off with, like, unless it's like a story that's purely action-centered, and you have a hero who's basically the same every time and who just goes to beat up the bad guys, you're not going to get off with that. And even most action heroes have some level of development at some point, whether it comes prior to the story or not. it's just, yeah. Sorry, I'm going off on a writing tangent. But yeah, it's an important point. And unfortunately, too many books and TV series fall into that trap nowadays. Let's see. Oh dear. Yeah, you can try too hard either way. If you try too hard to not make a Mary Sue, you can still end up making a Mary Sue. It's just, I don't know. It's, and some amount of that is going to be normal at first. Writing is a craft. It has to be defined, refined, it has to be developed. But at some point, too, like, as you grow in writing, eventually you'll get to the point of being able to say, oh, that character is not very well developed and stuff. Let's see. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's quite a lot of rant. It's okay, rant can be good sometimes. Sometimes it's good to get it out. That is something we put a lot of thought into with Raiden's Quest, is trying to figure out how to make the characters individual and trying to give them their own thoughts and their own development so that they're not going to fall into that cliche trap. And hopefully, I'm hoping that'll come across pretty well. I feel like we have a fairly diverse cast of characters. Hopefully it won't come across as too cliche. I know this idea is similar to things that have been done before, but the thing is, a lot of those things that were done before have fallen into the very cliche traps that are out there. And so I'm hoping we can take this idea and do it well, and do it in our own way and not the way that's been done before. Alright, let's fill that in. Finish filling this in, and then we'll go ahead and put in his darker markings, and then we may get started a little bit on the shading, but we might have to save a lot of it for next week because shading usually takes a while. Let's see. Yeah, you probably do want to chill out about it a little bit, though. It is getting to be a bit much. Just make sure you're being civil about everything. Make sure you're being civil about everything, and don't start unnecessary arguments. It's okay to discuss, but just keep it nice. Let's see. I'm gonna fill in this. Alright. Let's see. Alright, let's see. Alright, I'm gonna just keep working on this. And put that in there. Yeah, coloring in is really fun because that's when you really get to see the drawing come to life. And that is really what's interesting about it, is when you can kind of see it all coming together and how it all works together to become how it starts to become a greater, or like you can see how the line art looks good, but then once you get the coloration in, it kind of brings it all together. I use Photoshop, and let's see, yeah, I use Photoshop for my work most of the time. Alright, here we go. Let's see. It's extremely difficult to color with a mouse. I actually use a tablet because I can't draw with a mouse. Let's see. fill this in. I think his nose is a little bit, like the marking up there is a little bit too thick, so we'll come and trim that down. I'm going to fill in some of these spots that I noticed that weren't completely filled in. And, let's see. Here we go. Alright, let's see. Alright. Yeah, Scratch is, not... It's got... I like its vector editor, but... I don't know. As a general drawing program, it's not so good. It's very hard to draw, and I used to use Scratch. Yeah, make sure to keep everything civil in the chat, please. Alright, let's see. Alright. I'm gonna go ahead and fill this in. Sorry if I'm a little quiet, I'm trying to concentrate. Alright. Let's see. I'm gonna come down and... I think I'm actually going to make this one... There we go. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see. We'll make sure we get this dark area in as well. Yeah, don't lick your iPad screen, please. Oh no. Alright. Alright. Alrighty, here we go. Pretty sure you were the one who did it last time. Speaking from experience. I'm actually going to trim down some of this area, and then we'll add in the dark area over it. Let's see. There we go. Alright, it's a lot of little nitpicky work working on all of this. Drawing honestly just takes practice, and I mean, if you have to, I've been drawing for what, how long? I've been drawing since I could pick up a pencil pretty much, but I've been really working at it for several years here, and so it's a matter of, you gotta first of all work from a reference, get used to the subject matter of what you're drawing, and then once you're used to it, you can start stylizing off it. So like, I've spent several years drawing a lot of wolves from references, and so with all that, I got pretty used to their anatomy and how that all works, so that helped a lot. And that's why I can do all this freehand now, is because I got used to it working from a reference. So it's best to start out with references until you get used to the subject matter. Let's see. Well, as for the background characters, I might open it up for that at some point. That is also one of the high-end reward tiers if you support us on Patreon, but it is a quite high-end tier, so maybe at some point I'll open up contests for background characters. I don't know. I haven't totally decided what I'm doing with that yet. But yeah, as for the background character design, I would not be opposed to doing some sort of contest, perhaps. Maybe some sort of publicity contest to help get the word out there, and the winner could, the winning design could be a background character or something like that. Let's see. Do I have any old drawings? Yes and no. I have some old art on here. I don't have... A lot of my old art is on my old computer, but I can try and look and see. So, like, first of all, I mean, there's this. This is some old art. This is, like I said, probably 9 months old, so it has come a long way even in that amount of time. Let me see if I have any other pictures here. And let's see. Yeah, usually Song designs our background characters, so we do want to leave a lot of them for her. And she's done a great job of coming up with designs for them so far. She's come up with a lot of cool designs, and I'm really excited for you guys to see them. You'll see some of them starting already in episode 1. Let's see. This is... When is this from? It's not going to tell me. Okay, then. Well, this is really old art. This was some of the very earliest concept art. And, yeah. That's a little bit of an interesting one. It's pretty old. And then, maybe there would be a template or something we could give out for the design or something. So that was some of the oldest art. And then I have older art, but a lot of it isn't, I can't access it right now. So let's see. Yeah, I don't have a lot of other... This is some of the oldest stuff I have on here. A lot of the older stuff than this is on my, my old laptop. But, I have a lot of older art that I maybe will have to try and dig out. I found some old Raiden's Quest stuff when I was cleaning my room recently. I was like, oh, hey, I remember this from... Raiden's Quest has been around for about 4 years now, I want to say. And 4 to 5 years. And originally it was going to be a video game, so I have a lot of old concept art from back in that era. That is, from way back then. And I'll have to see if I can find some of that and scan it in again. I think I set it to one side at one point. So let's see. Yeah, my style has gone through a lot of change over the past few months, and it's finally stabilized out a little bit, but it still does shift from time to time. It's just a little bit slower and more subtle. And I'm sure you'll be able to see that over the course of the animation. Because it's such a lengthy process that there are some of those shifts will come into play. But for the most part, we're trying to maintain a consistent style for the animation. Dogs sleep a lot. Cats sleep even more, though. But yeah, a lot of animals will sleep a lot. Except for young animals. There's like 2 phases in many animals' lives. The hyper phase and then the sleeping phase. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I've been working on the project for a long time, and it has come quite a ways in that time. I'm honestly very pleased with where it's at right now as compared to where it was, because it's changed so much, and I really am. I like where it's ended up. I'm pretty pleased with this style. And so now I'm working more on refining it than on finding a style. I think this is the style I do want to stick with, at least for the time being. And now I'm just working on refining the specifics of it. And that's usually how it goes, is even if you find a style, you keep working at it, you keep shifting little things. Art usually doesn't stay stationary. It changes a little from time to time. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. I'm gonna actually just fill in that whole thing. And I don't necessarily want this to match up perfectly because there is a gap. His leg is coming over the, like, there, that line is there to show that his leg is in front of his body. And so we don't really want it to match up perfectly. So let's see. Alright. Here we go. I'm going to actually shrink this down for some more detail work on the tail. No pun intended. Oh, that's always really sad, Meow. That was, I had a kitten like that who unfortunately didn't make it very long either. It's hard when they're so young because they're so inexperienced and they're into everything. Like, they get into everything. And so sometimes even when you try really, really hard, they find ways of getting into something they shouldn't. And that is not a good thing. Yeah. Oh man, we had a really old scary cat at one point. We had her, she was older than me. She made it to 16, and she was the scariest cat I've ever encountered. She was not very friendly, but every once in a while she wanted cuddles, and she would come up and she would put her head against you and she would headbutt you until you pet her, and if you didn't pet her she would scratch you. But she was also a long hair and she would get mats because we couldn't brush her. We actually had to bring her to the vet to get her shaved several times because her mats got so bad. And we couldn't even bring her to the groomers because they couldn't handle her. So she was kind of scary like that, but she would come, and because she had the mats, she didn't like them being touched, and so if you accidentally brushed one of her mats, she would scratch you, and so you'd be sitting there just casually petting her head, trying to pet her enough, but at the same time trying not to pet her in the wrong place because you would get attacked if you made the wrong move. So we had an old cranky cat at one point too. All right, let's see. It's hard because pets don't live as long as we do, and so unless you get them really, really late in life, in most cases there's a pretty good chance you're going to end up living longer than them. So it's always hard to say goodbye to them. But they always, well, not always, but a lot of them give us many fond memories and things we can look back on, even the old cranky ones. I think, I'm going to add in a little bit here, but I think that about sums up the coloring. So this is basically, you guys have all seen this design many times by now, as I've drawn Raiden quite a bit, and I think this is the picture we're going to go with for when we do the shading. So I'm actually going to turn off the back layer so we can see just how it looks. Oh hey Nova, I must have missed your entrance. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're gonna have this be the oh, this is gonna be the what we go with. The tongue and teeth is a little bit of a complicated thing because at the angle we're at, we can't really see that much. We're kind of, his head is at such an angle that we can't really see that much of them, so I didn't really draw them in. So I think we're gonna leave it like this. But yeah, we can't really see them from this angle. And let's see if we can take a look at the shading. So what I usually do when I go to start shading is, and the shading is going to depend on the light. So the light source in this scene, I think I'll draw this in, the light source is going to be up in this corner, and so what that looks like practically, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do in order to demonstrate, and that will be to use a gradient. Normally I don't like using gradients, but for the sake of demonstration they can be helpful. So our, I'll set this to multiply. So if we have our light source in the upper corner, oops, this is the wrong kind of gradient, never mind. Nope, don't do that. Nope, go back. There we go. So we'll start with this. So if we have our light source in the upper corner and it goes down like this, it's going to cast like that. So the shadows are going to be on this side of the body, and the light is going to be on this side of the body. And normally I don't use gradients, though. I'll usually use gradients in the foreground and the background, but then I do more detailed shading. And when it comes to, I don't know why it's not letting me Control Z. When it comes to the coloration, the color of the light can have a very great effect. So if we change this to red, that's going to cast a completely different look than if we change it, say, to blue. That's going to be more of a moonlight type scene. Or if we change it to green, it's going to have a different look. So the light color is also important. That's going to be more like sunlight. Purple is kind of scary. Or a light blue. That almost seems like he's underwater. The light source is going to be, the light source and the light color are going to be very, very important. And that's something we're going to look at. I'll probably show different, several different color sources, or colorations in this, depending on the color of the light. It'll set a totally different tone to the picture, depending on what we draw. We can also do like an orange light. This might be more like a fire or something. So let's see. Yeah, the different colorations are going to cast a totally different feel on it. My throat is doing alright. I'm still drinking my tea, so that's good. Yeah, moonlight actually is sunlight when it comes down to it, but it does look different. So we could even do, there's any number of colors we can get that will have a very different feel depending on how the cast is. Let's see. Yeah, we're over an hour and a half. We usually go for about 2 hours, but well, the purple is scary for. You'll see why the purple's scary. Let me just say that. What my mind immediately went to is definitely something scary. So a lot of the difference too between the very dramatic lights like red, I'll use the red down here, and these colors are all warm colors. All of these are going to be warm colors, so they're going to have a very bright feel like sunlight or fire. Even some of these greens are pretty warm colors. But as you get over here, you start seeing more cool colors, especially as you get into the blues. And that's going to maybe be more indicative of a less intense light source, like maybe moonlight or a very low light scene. Also, depending on how big the spread of it is, you can have just a very abrupt divide, or a much more gradual fade. And depending on how much of a fade I want, or how dramatic I want the lighting to be, I sometimes use 1 or 2 layers. It kind of just depends. So we'll talk about more of this a lot more next time. We'll probably have to make this a 2-part, and I think I'll go ahead and wrap this up for now. But does anybody have any last questions before I go? And we'll come back and finish the shading next time. This turned out to be less about shading than I thought it was going to be. Alright. I'll give a little time for questions here, just in case. Nobody has questions? Nobody has questions? Oh dear. Yeah, the blue light, this blue kind of does shade his eyes, and that's because it's very close to being a complement. So his eyes are very golden yellow, and they're right in this range, and the complement to that is right about over here. So if we do that, it basically just darkens it completely, and almost, if you put 2 complements together, it's going to shade the other. So like if you put, Demonstration time! Yay! Let's see. Let me get some colors. So, complementary colors. So you have your primary colors. I'm going to do this by making circles. So we'll do this on a new layer. So you have your primary colors. You have red. You have yellow. We will move this over. Nope, don't do that. And you have... That's not a very good yellow, is it? I want a better yellow. And you have blue, which is going to be this blue right in here, I think, probably. So these are your primary colors. And then we'll duplicate this. And there's a simple way of doing this. Oh, that was not what I meant to do. Please behave yourself, Photoshop. So we'll deselect, and then we're going to actually scoot this down, and what I'm going to do is put it like this. And what we'll do is we'll actually go Image and Adjustments, and we'll do the hue saturation, and I'll shift it a little, and that we should be able to do this, right? Because then we want it so that, okay, so red's opposite, let's see, red is going to need green. Yellow is going to be... That's not going to do it. So we want this one, we'll adjust it to be green. This one we will adjust to be purple. And where's purple? Here's purple. And this one we will adjust to be orange. Let's see. There's orange. So that's primary colors and their complements. So basically, if we set this to multiply, you'll see how it just immediately darkens for the most part. The purple one, not so much. Purple one didn't exactly do it. I probably got the wrong shade of purple. But you'll see, especially with red and green, it just darkened. It darkened. Even here it darkened. We probably should shift the purple a little bit to be more of a direct opposite. If we change this slightly... There we go. That's more the direct opposite. You'll see it immediately darkens because it's complementary colors. So, yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing. So that's why when we have the blue, because his eyes are basically, or when we have the bluish purple, his eyes are basically yellow with a little bit of orange. The complement, this is basically a complement, and so, oops, what am I doing? Whoa, okay, let's not do that. So if we go here, no, why, what? Okay, oh, I didn't switch it. I didn't actually switch it. I thought I had for a moment. And, if we do this, it basically just darkens them. So that's what's going on there. So let's see. Well, and the thing is, okay, so why can't we have a why can't we have a daily stream? Unfortunately, yeah, my voice would be dead. I also just recorded 7 episodes yesterday and quite a large number the day before, so yeah, it's been a lot. My voice is already partially dead, and I probably do need to rest it a bit. So unfortunately, I can't stream daily, much as I would enjoy that. But weekly streams are pretty manageable. So we'll be back here next week to work on this and finish this up, and I'll show you a lot more about the shading then. So thank you guys for coming, and I will see you guys then, hopefully. Bye, everyone!